Are you feeling stuck with your art? Or maybe you're wondering why your art is so different from the professionals. In this video, I'll be telling you the mistakes you are making and how you can fix them. Ditch graphite. Okay, hear me out first. You see, graphite is good. It works nicely. Everyone starts out with graphite because it is easily accessible and it is very easy to use. I like to call graphite low maintenance. All you have to do is start shading with a light grade pencil and work your way up to a darker pencil and build up tones. And oh, what's that? You made a mistake while shading? Easy, clean it with your eraser. It's graphite, you'll be fine. But the issue with graphite is that it is so slow. You won't notice this issue if you are just starting with simple realistic drawings, but trust me, when you start to venture into the jungle of hyperrealism where it is like survival of the fittest, relying on graphite will leave you in the dust. For one, the lead on the pencil can't cover a large area. You have to shade over many times to fully cover the area you want to shade. Secondly, if you want to build up tones, you have to shade with your HB pencil, layer it on top with your 2B pencil, your 3B pencil, your 4B pencil, your 6B pencil, your 8B pencil, all the while trying to make sure that your shading is smooth. And if after going through all of that stress of using multiple pencils, you get a nice result, no problem. I'll happily use graphite all day, any day. But rather, what do I get? Blinding lights. It shines so bright that it will make the sun jealous. So this is why I suggest people to get on board with charcoal. Charcoal is nice, it gets dark easily, and most importantly, it doesn't leave a shine. You don't have to shade with 30 pencils just to get the shading tone you want. And if you now even use a brush to shade with the charcoal powder, oh lord, you'll be swimming in paradise. It is hard to master, yes, but when you get the hang of shading with charcoal powder, boy, you will love drawing like a kid who just got a new toy to play with. But of course, don't only use charcoal, because charcoal too has its downside. Try to avoid both extremes, only using graphite or only using charcoal. I find that the best thing is mixing the best of both worlds. Take a little bit of charcoal and a little bit of graphite and mix them together. This video explains exactly how I do that. Don't worry, the link will be in the description, so don't click off this video. The link is not going anywhere. You can watch the video after. Use the right tools for the job. See, I'm a big advocate of using what you have. You don't need fancy tools to create amazing drawings. But people get me wrong. Just because you don't need fancy art materials doesn't mean that you don't want fancy art materials. Doesn't mean that those materials are totally useless. Because while having expensive and advanced materials wouldn't make you an art god, what it will surely do is save you a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of time. These materials are things that will make your life so much easier. So the bottom line is, if you cannot afford to buy these fancy art materials, you can still create good drawings with what you have, though it will take a little bit more time and effort. But if you have little change to spare on art materials, try to invest it in some extra tools that will make your job easier. And it doesn't even have to be the most expensive ones. Like for example, these brushes are the cheapest brushes I could find. And this Tombow Mono Zero eraser and the electric eraser are also quite cheap, but they work wonderfully. Before we move on to the next mistake, let's talk about our sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts. You can find classes on design, illustration, film, productivity, and more. Some classes are under 60 minutes, but I found this class that is over 2 hours by Shane Wise called Drawing Photorealistic Portraits with Pencil. He talks about a lot of things in this class, but I love how he teaches the things to look for when choosing a reference image, like dramatic lighting, shadows, shallow depth of field, and many more. He teaches you how to create a value scale chart and how important this is when drawing realistically. Now, after getting that foundation, he now takes you through drawing the actual face. An annual subscription to Skillshare is $14 a month, but right now, the first 500 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so consider checking that out. Please stop with the lines. Why do artists always draw lines when they are shading realistic drawings? Like, this isn't cartoon. Okay, actually, I know the answer. You know, when you are drawing, you are trying to depict the difference in the values of a portrait, meaning you are trying to show that this cheek and the background are different things. So when beginners want to show that the cheek is separate from the background, they use lines to make that demarcation. But when you look at the drawings of the top dogs, the geniuses, the experts, the professionals, the absolute virtuosos in the field of hyperrealism, everything in their shading is soft. There are no hard lines. Rather than use lines to show that demarcation, what they use is the shading itself. When you make one side darker than the other side, the separation will appear naturally. Use gradients. If you want to draw realistically and you are not using gradients, you are not serious with your life. Now, if you have no idea what gradients are, it's basically when one value blends into another value. If you are just shading and all the tones are sitting on their own without blending into each other, then the shading will not look smooth. I mean, just look at this my drawing from 2015. Hey, don't laugh. I had only just started drawing at this point. Maybe just like 3 months of shabby practice, so don't judge. Besides, it's a lot better than what some of you are creating. Yeah, I see you. But what I'm saying is that when you see these shading tones, especially the shading of the cheek, would you say that it is blended smoothly? Would you say that there is gradient here? No, the dark patch sits on its own and the other light patch too is sitting on its own, no blending together of the tones. But now when you now contrast this with one of my most recent drawings, like in this one, you can find a dark shading also on the cheek. But the difference between this one and that is that this one, you can see a blending between the tones. There is a gradual transition from the dark tones to the light tones of the cheek. And this gradual transition is what we call gradients. And my brother, if you are not doing this, or my sister, just go and draw anime. Grade is cheating. Now, some people are going to eat me in the comments. You see, most people say that you should never draw using grids or draw using tracing because that will be cheating. Always draw with freehand. While there are other people that will say, this is in 2004, nobody cares about what you used to draw. You use whatever you want, whether it is grid or tracing. But as for me, I'm more in the middle. When people ask what they should use, whether grid or freehand, I like to recommend what I did, what I used when I was starting out. Like for example, for me, in my first year of drawing, I used only freehand. Why? Because I wanted to get that foundation. You see, drawing with freehand will train your brain to think like an artist when drawing facial proportions, and as a beginner, you would need that foundation. But then, after like that first year, I immediately switched to grids. You see, if you want to leave that beginner level and take your art to the next stage, you cannot be sticking with freehand worrying whether you got the resemblance or the person right. That is wasting time. Look at the big artists, the big hyper-realistic artists. Nobody has time to bother about freehand or trying to bother whether they get the resemblance or the likeness of the person they are drawing. The main meat of the drawing is the shading. So they use tracing or they use grids to get the troublesome outlines out of the way and then focus all their efforts and worrying on shading the skin. But if your goal is not to be a hyper-realistic artist, but to be like an animator, a comic book artist, or an illustrator, then forget all of what I just said. All of that doesn't apply. But if you want to be a hyper-realistic artist, I would say that you start with freehand, learn the basics. And when you have a good foundation, when you are average, you can now skip to grids or tracing. That will help you progress faster and improve your shading faster. If you would like to know how to draw facial proportions using grids, then check out this video. It will tell you all you need to know about drawing with the grid method. Watch that. Yes, that. And I'll see you in the next one.